I spoke with the Bank of Canada's former governor, Stephen Poloz, and asked him what he reads into today's big inflation number.
But that's the main thing, is all this is a price increase. And if oil prices and energy costs stay roughly where they are today, then of course over the next 12 months, what we would get is a gradual unwinding of that effect in the inflation rate. And that's really important for people to bear in mind. I know we just report this one big number. The fact is, most of it is nothing we can control, and it will be transitory. There's the T word.
Okay, help us understand, because, and in layman's terms, because what we have seen is certainly a number of months ago, the assessment around inflation was that it was transitory. Since then, we've seen certain figures, for example, in the U.S. acknowledge that that assessment at that point in time was wrong. When you say it's transitory, do you mean, what exactly do you mean in layman's terms? And what can Canadians take from that about how high those prices will be 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road?
So an important distinction. The prices that we see today could be the same price, let's say, for gasoline 6 months or 12 months from now. That's possible. But if that is the case, the rate of inflation will steadily go down all by itself, just because the prices from 12 months ago are rising too. And so that's the kind of the arithmetic effect. And that's the sense in which economists said from the beginning that this would be transitory, not that it would go away immediately, but that it would go away by itself in a mechanical way. Now, the longer that takes, oil prices, have been rising for more than a year now. And so it'll take more than a year for those things to dissipate in the calculation. What do we be left with? Well, the question is, how much do those higher oil prices and other energy costs infect the rest of the economy? And that is the part that is subject to control. And that is the part that the central banks will be responding to, not the energy costs themselves. It's a really important distinction.
Do you think that early assessment, as I mentioned, as was acknowledged in the United States, was incorrect? Do you think, for example, that central banks overall, and I'm not asking you to opine specifically on this one, but overall got it wrong initially?
Well, initially, from what I said the same thing, so I'm not going to say I was wrong. I think it is still correct that the supply chain issues should have gone away faster. They're taking longer to correct because there have been more shutdowns subsequent to our return to normal.
Let me try and make it as digestible as possible for Canadians and ask you to come along with me. When you say that it was that it would, I guess I wonder, would it be wrong to have been more aggressive with interest rates earlier, given what we know now?
So if we look back and, if we, at the time, I'd say a year ago, we were worried about, Delta and then Omicron and another whole wave of, recessionary conditions in the economy. But of course, as it turned out, we were pretty resilient to those. So of course, if you've known how things would turn out, I think you might have done it differently. But of course, the fact is, we didn't know how it would turn out. And so it was right to be cautious. Throughout what was most important was to protect the downside in the economy and avoid a deflationary track, which would run the risk of creating the second Great Depression. We should all be pretty happy that that was averted. And if because of that success, we've ended up a little too much on the other side of this, that's still a really big success. And we're in a position now where we know a certain amount of inflation will prove transitory. Let's suppose it's 3.5%, the underlying inflation rate. That's how much inflation actually has been annualized since just before the pandemic, excluding energy. And if that's where we end up, that's a manageable thing. And it'll take maybe a year or two to get back to 2%. That's a manageable process. And none of it has to be that traumatic.
And if I could just for a second say, and I totally understand the way in which you're characterizing it. I think for Canadians, the word manageable or not so bad or a success are hard to rectify with the prices that they're paying or the struggles they're having right now with the cost of living. Do you anticipate an aggressive posture by the central bank? Do you anticipate that they will need to do successive, large-sized rate hikes, or will that be something analyzed as they go?
I think it's an analyze as you go, a feel your way thing. There's a certain amount which is a given. We basically have to get back to what we consider to be neutral or normal. So no one should be surprised that that's occurring. Everybody who thought interest rates would stay at zero, well, that was just a dream. That would not go on. Once the emergency was passed, then we had to get back to normal. But there are key things that we don't know, Vashi, like how much will the economy slow down by itself just because of these higher energy costs and food costs that we're all paying? That takes money out of your pocket that's not available for the summer vacation or whatever else you were hoping to spend money on. So that's an effect that is even more widespread than rate hikes on the effect on the economy. We also don't know how the economy will react to higher interest rates. There's more debt. It may be more fragile. And of course, it's surprising to many.
Prediction is certainly difficult. It's become very, understandably, I think, to a certain degree, political. And I'm wondering, just as someone who has occupied that governor chair before, what you make of the calls, for example, to fire the Bank of Canada governor vis-a-vis everything that's happened with inflation. Those are very, I know it's politics, but it certainly is imbuing like a perception of the bank and of that position onto much of the public. And I wonder what you would say in response.
Well, you say it's political, it's pure politics. And that, of course, is to some extent, it's unfortunate that politics infects the monetary policy process at all. Central banks are designed to be separate from politics, and for very good reasons. Okay, and the odd thing is historically it's been the politicians that want to overexpand the economy, overheat the economy, and therefore run higher risk of having inflation. I'm gratified that right now the public perception is this inflation is a bad thing and we should fight it. And that's good because that's exactly right. But historically, that has not been the case. It's why central banks need that independence to be able to operate in an intelligent way, in a measured way, and not be moved around by political stresses or any other phenomena. And so I think it's unfortunate that the issue has gone so political. I expect that as we go through the second half of the year, I think oil prices probably have about peaked by now. So there's a very good chance that over the second half of this year, we'll see inflation ticking down a little bit most months. I think that's going to reassure people quite a lot. Plus, of course, the central banks are, moving into gear, moving rates higher, making it clear that they're on the job and taking care of this. And I think people will be reassured by it. And then, of course, that should mean it becomes a lot less political.
Okay, we shall see. Thank you, Mr. Poloz. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.